My name is Dorothy, and I'm 72 years old. What happened at my son's wedding 3 months ago changed my life forever. And I need to share this story with all of you wonderful people watching today. Harold was my only child, his father. My dear husband Robert passed away 15 years ago from a heart attack. Since then, it had been just Harold and me against the world. I worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices at night and taking care of elderly folks during the day, just to put him through college. I sacrificed everything for that boy. I sold my mother's jewelry, took out loans, and lived on beans and rice for months just to make sure he had everything he needed. When Harold graduated and became a successful lawyer, I thought my struggles were finally worth it. He moved to the city, got a fancy apartment, and started making good money. But slowly he began visiting less and less. Phone calls became shorter. Holiday visits turned into quick hellos and goodbyes. Then came Priscilla. Priscilla was everything I wasn't: young, blonde, from a wealthy family with old money. Her father owned 3 restaurants downtown, and her mother belonged to all the right social clubs. It's the first time Harold brought her home. I could see the way she looked at our modest little house with its faded wallpaper and worn furniture. She wrinkled her nose when I served dinner on my everyday dishes instead of the fine china I kept for special occasions. Mrs. Thompson. She said in that sweet but cold voice of hers, "Harold has told me so much about you." But her eyes said something entirely different. They said I wasn't good enough for her precious Harold. Over the next 2 years, I watched my son change. He started criticizing everything about me: the way I dressed, the way I spoke, even the way I held my fork. "Mother," he'd say, "Priscilla's family is very sophisticated. Maybe you could try too. Just a little." I tried. Lord knows I tried. I bought new clothes with money I couldn't afford to spend. I took etiquette classes at the community center. I even learned to play bridge so I could fit in with Priscilla's mother's circle. But nothing was ever good enough. When Harold proposed to Priscilla, I was the last to know. I found out from my neighbor Edith, who had seen the engagement announcement in the newspaper. My own son couldn't even call to tell me he was getting married. The wedding planning was a nightmare. Every suggestion I made was shot down. Every tradition I wanted to include was deemed too old-fashioned or not classy enough. When I offered to help pay for something, anything, Priscilla's father laughed and said, "Don't worry about it, Dorothy, we've got this covered." I felt like a stranger in my own son's life. The final blow came 3 weeks before the wedding. Harold called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I had just finished watching my favorite cooking show and was settling in with a cup of tea. "Mother," he said, his voice stiff and formal, "we need to talk." My heart sank. Nothing good ever started with those words. Priscilla and I have been discussing the wedding," he continued, "and we've decided it would be best if you didn't attend." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped and nearly dropped my teacup. "What do you mean, Harold?" I whispered. "It's just that ... Well, Priscilla's family has certain expectations. So it's going to be a very elegant affair, and we're worried that you might not feel comfortable." Not feel comfortable at my own son's wedding. It's for the best. Mother, really? We'll have a nice dinner afterward, just the 3 of us. Wouldn't that be better? I sat there in stunned silence, listening to my son, my baby boy, whom I had raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, tell me I wasn't good enough to witness the most important day of his life. I understand. I finally said, though I didn't understand at all. I knew you would. Harold said, relief evident in his voice. "I'll call you after the honeymoon." He hung up, and I sat there in my empty house, surrounded by pictures of Harold from every stage of his life. And I cried harder than I had since Robert died. But then something strange happened. As the tears dried, I felt something else rising inside me. Not just hurt, not just anger, but determination. A fire I hadn't felt in years. Asterisk, I looked around my little house. This house where Harold had taken his first steps, said his first words, where I had bandaged his scraped knees and helped him with homework every night for 12 years. This house that Priscilla thought wasn't good enough? Asterisk. If you're enjoying this story of how a mother's love turned into something much more powerful, please hit that subscribe button below. Your support means the world to storytellers like me, and there's so much more to come. Asterisk, that night I made a decision. They didn't want me at the wedding, fine. But I wasn't going to disappear quietly into the background of Harold's life. I was going to show them exactly what they were rejecting. Asterisk, the next morning. I called my late husband's brother, Uncle Chester. Chester had always been the successful one in the family. He'd started a small construction business 30 years ago that had grown into a major development company. He'd offered to help us financially over the years, but Robert had been too proud to accept. Chester was also the executor of my mother-in-law's estate, which had been tied up in legal proceedings for years. Asterisk, Chester. I said, remember that inheritance from Robert's mother that's been stuck in probate? Asterisk, of course, Dorothy. The lawyers finally got it sorted out last month. I've been meaning to call you. It's quite a bit more than we initially thought. Nearly $400,000 after taxes and fees. Asterisk, $400,000. I nearly fainted. Asterisk, there's something else, Chester continued. You know that old Victorian house on Maple Street that's been for sale forever? The one with all the original details. Well, it just came back on the market, and with your inheritance. Asterisk, by the end of that phone call, I had not only discovered I was considerably wealthier than I'd ever imagined, but I also had a plan. Asterisk, the house on Maple Street was magnificent, a 3-story Victorian with original hardwood floors, stained glass windows, and a wraparound porch. It needed work, but it had good bones and incredible character. More importantly, it was 3 blocks away from the country club where Harold and Priscilla were having their wedding reception. Asterisk, I bought the house and immediately hired the best contractors in town. While Harold was off on his honeymoon in Italy, I was transforming my new home into something that would make Priscilla's family estate look ordinary. Asterisk. But the house was just the beginning. Asterisk, I enrolled in charm school, not the community center. Classes this time, but the exclusive finishing school downtown where senators' wives learned proper etiquette. I hired a personal shopper who dressed celebrities. I took cooking classes from a chef who had trained in Paris. I learned to speak French and took up oil painting. Asterisk, more importantly, I started volunteering at the Children's Hospital and the Literacy Center. I joined the board of the Historical Society and began organizing charity galas that raised more money than the country club's annual fundraiser. Asterisk, within 6 months. I had become exactly the kind of woman Priscilla's mother pretended to be. Genuinely cultured, genuinely generous, and genuinely respected in the community. Asterisk, Harold and Priscilla returned from their honeymoon to find their phone ringing constantly with friends, asking about Harold's amazing mother who was doing such wonderful work in the community and living in that gorgeous house on Maple Street. It's the first time Harold saw the house. He stood on the sidewalk with his mouth open for a full minute. Mother, he finally said, where did you get the money for all this? Asterisk, your grandmother's inheritance finally came through, I said simply. Chester helped me invest it wisely. Asterisk, Priscilla was practically vibrating with curiosity and barely concealed envy. It's very nice, she managed. Asterisk, thank you, dear. Would you like to come in for tea? I just learned the most wonderful recipe from Chef Marcel. Asterisk, over the next few months, I watched my son's marriage crumble. Priscilla, it turned out, had married Harold primarily because she thought he was her ticket to a more sophisticated life. When she realized that he was just a small-town lawyer whose mother had somehow become more socially prominent than her own family, she began to show her true colors. Asterisk, she started demanding that Harold ask me for money. when I politely declined their requests for loans for a bigger house and fancier cars. Priscilla accused Harold of being weak and unable to stand up to his mother, asterisk. The irony was delicious. Asterisk, but the real satisfaction came 8 months after the wedding when I received a phone call from Harold, asterisk mother. He said, and I could hear the tears in his voice, I made a terrible mistake. Asterisk, what's wrong, sweetheart? Asterisk, Priscilla left me. She said I wasn't the man she thought she was marrying. She said my family didn't have the kind of money and status she needed. Asterisk, I felt a mixture of sadness for my son's pain and vindication, for the injustice I had suffered. Asterisk, I'm so sorry, Harold. Do you want to come home? Asterisk, home? Asterisk, to Maple Street. I have plenty of room, and I think we have a lot to talk about. Asterisk, when Harold walked into my new home that evening, he looked around at the elegant furnishings, the original art on the walls, the fresh flowers in crystal vases, and he began to cry. Asterisk, I'm so sorry, Mother. Was ashamed of you, and I was wrong. You're amazing, and I was too stupid and shallow to see it. Asterisk, we sat in my beautiful new parlor, the one with the restored Victorian fireplace and the Persian rug, and we talked like we hadn't talked in years. Harold told me how Priscilla had controlled and manipulated him, how she had convinced him that I was an embarrassment, how she had isolated him from everyone who truly cared about him. Asterisk, the worst part, he said, is that I let her. I chose her. Opinion over yours, and you're the person who loved me most in this world. Asterisk, as we talked deep into the night, I realized something important. My revenge hadn't been about the money or the house or the social status. It had been about showing my son and myself that I was worthy of love and respect exactly as I was. Asterisk, the money had simply given me the confidence to become the person I had always been inside. Asterisk, if this story is resonating with you, please consider joining our community by subscribing. Every subscription helps me reach more people who might need to hear these stories of resilience and transformation. Asterisk, Harold moved back in with me, and we began rebuilding our relationship. He started bringing me coffee in the morning before work, just like he used to do when he was a teenager. We cooked dinner together and watched old movies on Sunday afternoons. Asterisk, 6 months later, Harold met Sarah at the Literacy Center where I volunteered. Sarah was a librarian, a kind, intelligent woman who appreciated good books, home-cooked meals, and mothers who had raised wonderful sons. She thought my stories about Harold's childhood were charming rather than embarrassing. Asterisk, when Harold proposed to Sarah, he called me first. Asterisk, mother, he said, I want to ask Sarah to marry me, but only if I know you approve. Asterisk, do you love her? I asked Asterisk with all my heart. Asterisk, and does she love you for who you really are? Asterisk, she does. She loves that I call you every morning and that I know how to cook because you taught me. She even wants to learn your recipe for apple pie. Asterisk, then you have my blessing. Asterisk, Sarah and Harold were married in my garden on Maple Street. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends. Sarah wore her grandmother's wedding dress, and I walked Harold down the aisle because, as he said, you're the one who made me the man I am. Asterisk, during the reception, as I watched my son dance with his new wife under the fairy lights strung through my oak trees, I thought about that terrible phone call 18 months earlier. The call that had broken my heart, but it also set me free to become the woman I was meant to be. Asterisk, Priscilla drove by the house during the reception. I saw her slow down and stare at the celebration, at the elegant guests, at the happiness that she had tried so hard to exclude me from creating. Asterisk, I felt sorry for her, honestly. She had spent so much energy trying to marry into the life she wanted that she had never learned to build it for herself. Asterisk, as the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Harold found me sitting on the porch swing where I had spent so many evenings missing him. Thank you, Mother, he said, sitting down beside me. For what? Asterisk, for not giving up on me? For becoming even more amazing instead of letting what I did make you smaller? For showing me what real class and dignity look like? Asterisk, oh, sweetheart, I said, taking his hand. I didn't do any of this for revenge. Asterisk, you didn't? Asterisk, no. I did it because you taught me something important that day. You told me I wasn't invited to your wedding. Asterisk, what's that? Asterisk, you taught me that. I had been living my whole life trying to be good enough for other people. First, your father, then you, then Priscilla's family. But I had never tried to be good enough for myself. Asterisk, we sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds and watching the stars appear one by one. Asterisk, the money helped. I continued. But the real change happened when I decided that Dorothy Thompson, just as she was, deserved a beautiful life and meaningful relationships and respect. I almost lost you, Harold said quietly, but you didn't. And now you know that real love, the kind your father and I had, the kind you and Sarah have, isn't about impressing people or meeting their expectations. It's about seeing the best in each other and helping that best part grow. Asterisk today, 3 years later, Harold and Sarah live in the carriage house behind my main house. Sarah is pregnant with their first child, my first grandchild. We have Sunday dinners together every week, and Harold has never again made me feel like I need to apologize for who I am. Asterisk, I still live in the beautiful house on Maple Street. I still volunteer at the hospital and the literacy center. I've started a scholarship fund for single mothers who want to go back to school. And I'm learning to play the piano, asterisk, but the most important thing I learned from this whole experience is this: when someone tells you that you're not good enough, you have two choices. You can believe them and make yourself smaller, or you can prove them wrong by becoming more fully yourself than you ever dared to be. Asterisk, I chose the second option, and it changed everything. Asterisk, sometimes the most painful rejections in our lives turn out to be the greatest gifts, because they force us to stop seeking approval from people who don't deserve to give it and start living for the people who do, including ourselves. Asterisk, if my story has touched your heart or inspired you in any way, I hope you'll become part of our community by hitting the subscribe button. Together, we can share more stories of resilience, transformation, and the incredible strength that lives inside every one of us. Asterisk, the wedding that broke my heart ended up giving me the life I never knew I deserved. Okay? And sometimes that's exactly how the best stories begin, with someone telling you that you're not invited, and you deciding to throw your own party instead. Asterisk.